Hi, my name is Sarika Mande, and my project is Cordelia from King Lear, a modern exploration and application of Shakespeare. I wanted to do a project using Shakespearean text because for many actors, being able to effectively act Shakespeare and use the language is one of the greatest challenges and also a sign of a well-trained actor. Shakespeare remains relevant today not only because of the poetic and profound language, but also because of its exploration of universal themes and what it means to be human. Modern productions use current concepts and stylistic aspects to make the work resonate with modern audiences, which is what I wanted to do, by giving Shakespeare a more current and global application. I wanted to dismantle the idea that Shakespeare is intended for a certain elite audience, when in fact it should be able to be enjoyed by everyone, especially when it's done right and the message is conveyed clearly. The theme that I wanted to explore through Shakespeare was honor-based violence, specifically in India, and I thought that King Lear was an appropriate play to use for this because the plot deals with a king trying to divide his land between his three daughters. And to do this, he asks each of his three daughters how much they love him. And when the youngest, Cordelia, refuses to play this game, he disowns her. So this theme of betrayal and gratitude to parents and, disclaiming your children and also your children's duties to their parents and the duties of a daughter. I thought that these all really tied into South Asian and Indian culture and often what is behind the theme of honor-based violence. Honor killings still continue today. Between 2017 and 2019, there were 145 reported incidents of honor killings. And upon reading a lot of these articles of these stories of women, I drew inspiration from them and used elements from these articles to sort of inspire the imagery and the props and themes that I used in my project to give a voice to an issue and to women who don't necessarily have one or have the ability to use their voice. So as an actor, most of my work usually deals with getting a script and doing the character analysis and focusing on really bringing that character to life within the circumstances of a play. This, however, I had to oversee several technical elements from start to finish, and that in the beginning stages involved reading over 17 plays to choose a character and a concept that stood out to me. And then once this character and concept and play was chosen, I had to read that text several times so that I could extract as much meaning as possible and piece together a 10-minute cut. The more technical aspect includes making and designing a set, acquiring all the props and costumes, as well as editing, sound cues, and designing the lighting for the three portions of my set. So these steps I'll go more into detail in the next slides. The language is the most important part of my project because it's so crucial to be clear and understood due to the heightened nature of the language, and because I'm dealing with a totally new narrative that isn't in the original play. It's really important for me to make sure that I'm being as clear as possible in conveying the theme and the story and the plot of my project. So I had to read the play several times, and after 3 or 4 passes of the text, I started to highlight chunks of verse that I would then piece chronologically out of order to tell the story that I wanted to tell about a girl in India who was violated, disowned by her father and her family, and made an example of in her community, as so many women are in these honor-based violence-related crimes. So after making this 10-minute cut, the next step was to scan the piece, and that means to mark the iambic pentameter. So the pentameter is really important because Shakespeare leaves a lot of clues in the language for actors, and when there are different endings and different patterns in the meter, that means different things for how you have to act it. And this is the case also for things such as lists. If there are lists in the text and there are several things building, that's something that you have to acknowledge as an actor, because each of those things within the list is an image that you have to convey to the audience in order to make the language really clear. Antithesis are usually words that are opposites in the verse text, and really hitting these and making sure that these opposites are clear also contributes to the audience's understanding of the language and the message and what's going on. Hanging caesuras are usually when at the end of a verse line there's no punctuation, and this usually means that the character is thinking or is pausing for a reason before going on to the next line, and this is really important for an actor to acknowledge. So making sure that you're doing this in-depth analysis, even though the theme and the narrative is completely new, it's really important to understand these key elements so that the audience is understanding you, and you as an actor also know what you're saying and how you're communicating it. So as crucial as the language is to my project, I also wanted to make sure that my concept was being communicated visually. So for my set, I decided to use pretty minimalist flats and blocks for the structure of the set, and then I use a lot of props to communicate the setting. So because it is set in India, this involved me creating a portion of the stage into an Indian-style bazaar marketplace. So I use a lot of Indian garments and cloth to create that feel. And a lot of the props that I use were actually drawn from different articles that I read. So for example, I use a garland of shoes to, as a humiliation tactic for the character, and this was specifically drawn from an article I read where a woman was paraded around in the streets with a garland of shoes and a blackened face as a result of an honor-based violence-related crime. And this is an example of the set when it was first being developed and the different garments that I was using to create a portion of the stage. And the second picture, that's an example of the garland of shoes that I saw in one of the articles. And my costume pieces also had to reflect what had happened to the character. So I wanted to make sure it was clear that I was a victim of violence. So that's why the shirt is tattered and stained with blood. Lighting and sound were really important elements of the project because I needed to make sure that certain portions of the stage were lit and that other portions weren't too distracting when they weren't being used. And the sound cues also tied everything together, especially in transition, so there were no big moments of silence when I was going backstage or going from one portion of the stage to another. And finding these sound cues was a little bit difficult because I wanted to find sounds and songs that were culturally significant and accurate, so I had to do some digging on the internet and then edit them all together. And during the rehearsal process, this required a lot of trial and error and running it a bunch of times so that there were no hiccups and that the sound came in at the right time so that it wasn't distracting to the audience or the audience wasn't confused. But once it was rehearsed and once everything came together, it really did make a huge difference in tying the whole concept together. So acting Shakespeare is really different from modern realism acting because, once again, the language takes importance over really any conventional emotional or character work that you would do with modern realism. So as an actor, when you see imagery that Shakespeare is using in his text, it's your job to really visualize those images that you see written so that you're conveying them in a way that's clear and the audience can understand them. If you visualize those images, then the audience can visualize the same images if you're sending them clearly enough. So this part of the performance of the project required a lot of rehearsal. It was mostly a lot of my mentor giving me feedback and notes and me having to implement those. And it was important to have someone sort of playing devil's advocate as the audience to make sure that I was being as clear as possible because my concept was something new and not like the original content of the play. So I had to really make sure that I was saying the text in a way where the audience could understand the new plot. So for me, the takeaway from this project is that Shakespeare is still relevant globally and it's not limited to a specific country or race or class or gender. And it should be able to be enjoyed by everyone, but within that, it's the responsibility of whoever is acting it to make sure that it is palatable to multiple different types of audiences. So it needs to be performed in a way that's clear, and that includes making it clear through visual aspects, through the language. But at the end of the day, it has always been a tool to send a message. And when you can personalize something and give it life and relevance through your own perspective, that's really what art is about. And it was used to send a message to an audience back when it was first written, and it is still being used today to send messages and to really explore what it means to be human and these universal themes that we still experience today.